A bakery or small shop in a southern town finds more consistent sales when its customers receive steady paychecks rather than irregular earnings. In this way, industrial growth fosters a secondary economy of local services that supports broader communities. The circulation of income through consumption provides a more grounded measure of progress than aggregate export statistics. Infrastructure improvements further enable these changes. New roads, rail lines, and digital networks in historically marginalized regions not only attract investors, but also improve residents' access to public services and formal finance. Families once excluded from banks now have access to small loans or savings accounts, which in turn help them invest in agriculture, business, or home upgrades. In this way, development tools extend beyond welfare transfers toward systemic mechanisms of inclusion, building resilience against downturns. Yet the obstacles are clear. The cost of living has risen in many urban areas, with housing and basic services eroding part of the wage gains. For families in cities like Monterrey or Guadalajara, rising rent absorbs income increases quickly. Meanwhile, informal employment still dominates a large share of the labor force, particularly in service and agricultural sectors. Millions remain outside the safety net of formal work, reducing the overall pace of poverty alleviation. Sustaining progress requires faster expansion of good jobs beyond the most competitive states. Regional divides persist as well. Mexico City, Monterrey, and Guadalajara continue to capture disproportionate shares of wealth and opportunity, while isolated rural communities often lag far behind national averages. Even with southern development projects, poverty rates in states such as Chiapas and Oaxaca remain stubbornly high. Access to quality healthcare, schools, and secure housing is still uneven, leaving wide swaths of the population vulnerable despite national improvements. It is in these areas that industrial expansion and welfare programming have the greatest ground to cover. The underlying structures that produce inequality also remain intact. Land ownership is concentrated, tax revenue as a share of GDP is comparatively low, and wealth accumulation at the very top continues. Welfare payments and new industrial jobs soften the edges of inequality but have not eliminated its foundations. For many experts, the real test is whether Mexico can broaden its fiscal base, invest consistently in education, and sustain credit expansion for small businesses. Without structural reforms, the danger is that inequality narrows only temporarily before widening again. Nonetheless, the gains recorded by 2025 suggest that advances are not confined to brief upswings, but are tied to longer-term shifts. Integration into modern supply chains, the formalization of work, and more consistent welfare coverage combine to provide resilience against external shocks. Households report more stability than in past decades, when progress often disappeared with a fall in oil prices or a currency crisis. The trend line is modest, but it points in a direction that is steadier than before. The result is neither dramatic transformation nor stagnation, but a gradual improvement that people can feel. For the first time in a generation, the promise of economic growth is tangibly touching sections of the population that had long been left out. It has not erased inequality or ended poverty, but it has shifted conditions enough to matter in daily life. That this progress exists at all is significant after decades of imbalance. Yet even as incomes rise and poverty rates retreat, another factor limits how far these benefits can reach. Economic stability does not exist in a vacuum, and a parallel force continues to test the durability of Mexico's progress. The shadow of violence. Violence remains one of Mexico's most persistent challenges, weighing on both investment decisions and the daily lives of millions. Homicide rates in 2025 remain among the highest globally, though they vary sharply by region. Some states have reduced levels of violence, while others continue to endure the presence of organized crime and territorial disputes that destabilize communities. This uneven geography of insecurity creates stark differences in how Mexicans experience progress. Stability in one region can coexist with near-constant conflict just a few hundred kilometers away. The areas hit hardest by this violence illustrate how deeply crime intersects with the economy. Guanajuato, Michoacán, and Zacatecas remain flashpoints, where rival cartels contest control of drug routes, mining operations, and fuel theft networks. Along sections of the northern border, states like Tamaulipas still see clashes over smuggling corridors into the United States. By contrast, some southern states opening up to foreign manufacturing investment have managed greater calm. This divergence means that local economic opportunities are often defined by factors outside the reach of ordinary policy. Security can be the single variable that determines whether a region thrives or struggles. For investors, the result is a highly fragmented landscape. Large firms planning factories or logistics centers scrutinize not just infrastructure but also localized security conditions. Even with incentives and transportation links in place, some states are bypassed because insecurity drives up costs. Companies face higher premiums for insurance, must hire additional private security, and spend more to secure freight moving through hostile corridors. The extra expense adds up to what economists call an insecurity tax, a surcharge on doing business that erodes competitiveness compared to safer regions. The effect on supply chains is tangible. Freight hijackings on highways delay deliveries and force companies to reroute shipments. Rail lines crossing contested zones face interruptions that ripple through production schedules. In manufacturing industries where just-in-time delivery is critical, even minor delays can trigger contractual penalties or production downtime. This explains why many foreign firms prefer to cluster operations in states with lower risk, reinforcing regional disparities in development. Security, in other words, doesn't just shape perception. It influences the hard math of cost and reliability for global supply chains choosing Mexico. The local business environment suffers in different but related ways. In many towns, small entrepreneurs confront extortion from criminal groups who demand regular payments under the guise of protection. Restaurants, shops, and even farms are vulnerable, with refusal often carrying severe consequences. This practice, widespread in some regions, discourages local business growth. Entrepreneurs who might expand or formalize their operations instead limit activity to survive. For these communities, the presence of organized crime diverts income into illicit hands and blocks the emergence of stronger grassroots economies. Mexico's government continues to pursue a two-pronged strategy against this persistent challenge. Security forces, including the military and National Guard, remain deployed in violent states, providing visible deterrence and rapid response capacity. At the same time, federal social programs have been expanded to offer economic alternatives, with youth training, agricultural support, and job creation schemes intended to limit the recruitment pool for criminal groups. These efforts signal recognition that violence cannot be subdued by force alone. Yet combining military deployment with development programs has delivered uneven outcomes. Violence has stabilized in some areas, while others show little change. Civil society has become an increasingly visible actor in these efforts. Local NGOs, churches, and community associations run initiatives ranging from cultural centers to neighborhood watch groups. In certain cities, these bottom-up projects improve trust between residents and authorities, making it harder for criminal groups to dominate social space completely. While modest in scale compared to federal operations, these community-based responses highlight how stability often requires local legitimacy and not only top-down enforcement. Even so, the global perception of Mexico continues to be shaped by its violent reputation. International media frequently foreground stories of conflict and insecurity, and these narratives can weigh heavily on investor confidence. Financial analysts and corporate boards may downgrade prospects not because of actual disruption at a given site, but because of the country's overall image. Reputational risk, though less visible than stolen freight or higher insurance premiums, is another cost of violence, affecting how the country is evaluated in global markets. Yet it is also clear that violence no longer defines the entire economy as it once did. In earlier decades, security concerns often overshadowed every other theme in analyses of Mexico. By 2025, the picture is more complex. Investors recognize the reality of insecurity, but weigh it against the overwhelming draw of trade integration, labor availability, and geographic advantage. Many continue to invest, choosing safer locations and pricing security into their operations instead of withdrawing altogether. The shadow is still present, but it competes with narratives of growth, not erases them. At the community level, a similar dual reality exists. Expanding factories provide jobs and new income streams, while cartel disputes in neighboring states claim thousands of lives each year. Families in safer industrial hubs may feel optimism, while those in conflict zones face fear and economic paralysis. This parallel existence underscores how uneven Mexico's transformation remains. Prosperity spreads in some areas while violence entrenches hardship in others. The long-term question is whether the current wave of industrial growth and infrastructure expansion can alter this balance. If southern states developing new industrial corridors manage to maintain relative calm, they could demonstrate a model in which economic opportunity crowding out organized crime limits future violence. Early signs are cautiously positive, but observers warn that unless institutions grow in parallel with investment, the risk of criminal infiltration remains. A stronger rule of law, capable policing, and inclusive growth are necessary for development gains to endure. Mexico's economic story in 2025 is therefore marked by both resilience and fragility. On one side stands a record in trade and foreign investment that signals integration into global supply chains. On the other lies persistent insecurity that extracts measurable costs and limits how far benefits spread. Violence no longer dictates the national narrative, but its shadow stretches across regions and sectors, constraining the country's full potential. As Mexico balances progress against these enduring challenges, another force has quietly supported households across the country, cushioning families even in regions most affected by insecurity. Remittances, Mexico's hidden economic engine. Among the forces shaping Mexico's economic story in 2025, one of the most consistent comes from outside its borders. Remittances, money sent home by Mexican workers abroad, have for years outpaced oil as a leading source of foreign income, and they reached record levels in the early 2020s. These flows do not appear on factory floors or in trade headlines, yet they remain one of the most dependable supports for households and a crucial component of Mexico's overall stability. What makes remittances different from other inflows is their directness. While exports first pass through corporations and the state, remittances go straight into the hands of families. Parents use the transfers to pay for school fees, rent, or groceries the same week the money arrives. Others apply them to longer-term needs like improving houses or buying equipment for small shops. It is this immediacy that gives remittances such weight. Millions of households experience them not next quarter or next year, but in their daily routines. The effect is most visible in rural and semi-urban areas that are often overlooked by industrial investment. Manufacturing plants tend to cluster along the border or in major urban hubs. Remittances, by contrast, filter deep into small towns. A farming family in Zacatecas might use monthly transfers to repair a roof, while shopkeepers in Michoacan expand stock because local purchasing power has increased. These sums can look modest in national accounts, but become transformative in local contexts, supporting everyday commerce and stabilizing communities far from Mexico's traditional growth engines. At the household level, spending patterns typically begin with consumption. Food, clothing, and school supplies rise to the top of budgets. Over time, the priorities broaden. Families invest in education, keeping children enrolled longer and helping them climb into higher-paying work in the future. When enough households in a community invest in housing, the neighborhood itself improves. Better construction and infrastructure make homes less vulnerable to storms or accidents. A portion feeds into entrepreneurship. Corner shops, repair services, and small farms often start or grow through remittance-funded savings. These local ventures may seem small, but they stitch together the fabric of regional economies, particularly in places far from formal industrial clusters. Compared to traditional pillars of foreign income, this shift is significant. For decades, crude oil exports symbolized Mexico's role in global markets. They helped finance government budgets and reinforce the political importance of the state-run oil industry. But as national output declined and prices turned volatile, oil revenue shrank. Remittances, unaffected by commodity cycles, grew steadily. Their endurance stems from the determination of migrants who, regardless of downturns abroad, cut personal costs or take extra hours to ensure money continues reaching families at home. This resilience is striking during economic shocks. Past recessions and the pandemic showed that remittance inflows often increase precisely when other revenues dry up. Migrants treated downturns not as moments to scale back, but as times to send more, cushioning their families against inflation or job losses in Mexico. In 2025, the same logic applies. While manufacturing exports rise and fall with demand from the United States, remittances remain a consistent stream that balances the volatility of global markets. Viewed in the aggregate, their role extends well beyond individual families. Remittances contribute directly to domestic consumption, feeding into demand for goods and services in towns and cities. They also enter official accounts, strengthening foreign reserves and helping to stabilize the peso's exchange rate. Economists frequently note that these flows act as a buffer in Mexico's balance of payments, providing currency liquidity that reduces pressure on external debt or trade deficits. For investors studying Mexico, this steady inflow signals resilience even when global conditions look uncertain. Still, the system reveals contradictions. Millions of workers migrated because opportunities at home were limited or wages too low. Their absence creates a dependency cycle. Households thrive on money earned abroad, but those funds highlight deficiencies in domestic job creation. Critics point out that while remittances improve living standards, they also allow policy gaps to persist. Governments may feel less pressure to expand employment or education reforms urgently because household consumption is partly propped up by migrant earnings. This tension makes remittances both a solution and a reminder of unfinished work at home. Supporters argue that the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. Regions with steady remittance flows often outperform comparable areas in indicators like home ownership, school completion, and basic health. Even if dependency persists, the cumulative improvements prepare the next generation for better participation in Mexico's evolving economy. By preventing extreme poverty and funding investments at the family level, remittances lay groundwork for social mobility that may not exist otherwise. Beyond economics, remittances sustain cultural and communal networks. Migrant associations in the United States frequently pool resources to fund public works back in their hometowns, road repair, church renovations, or community centers. Local festivals and civic projects regularly cite remittance funding among their budgets. These initiatives maintain cohesion in regions where state institutions struggle to provide consistent services, demonstrating that remittances function as informal, decentralized development financing. The importance of these flows is hard to overstate in 2025. They now exceed federal social welfare budgets and arrive more efficiently than many state programs. Distributed without bureaucracy, they target families directly and create ripple effects that touch nearly every sector of local economies. In the process, they complement but also contrast with the high-profile projects of foreign investment and industrial corridors. While global capital builds megaplants in Nuevo León or Querétaro, remittances quietly build homes, schools, and shops across scattered towns and villages. However, long-term sustainability depends on whether Mexico can eventually expand domestic job creation. The rise in nearshoring and new investment corridors offers a chance for wages inside Mexico to grow closer to those outside. If the manufacturing expansion succeeds, remittances might evolve into a complement rather than a crutch, supplementing opportunities at home rather than compensating for their absence. That transition could redefine their role, keeping the stability of inflows while easing the heavy reliance on migration. For now, the reality is clear. Remittances remain one of Mexico's strongest and most stable economic engines. They underpin household consumption, reduce poverty, and bolster national accounts. Their reach extends from kitchen tables to balance of payments charts, providing resilience and flexibility in a way few other income streams can. At the same time, they expose the unfinished task of creating sufficient employment at home. Until that happens, families will continue depending on dollars earned abroad as well as pesos earned at home. Mexico's growth story in 2025 is shaped by the movement of goods and capital, but also by the human ties that bind migrants abroad to their families. This dual flow, investment from companies and remittances from workers, sustains the foundation of the country's economic transformation. But the question remains whether, alongside financial inflows, Mexico can cultivate the skills and workforce needed to sustain its new role in the global economy. Education and workforce development. Factories can be built quickly, skilled people take years. That reality defines Mexico's position in 2025. Industrial parks, logistics hubs, and advanced factories are rising fast, but the question is whether the country can cultivate a workforce capable of sustaining them. Foreign investors are confident in geography and trade access, but they consistently highlight one uncertainty: can Mexico deliver enough workers with the skills high-tech industries demand? Progress is visible, though uneven, and the answer will decide whether current growth becomes long-term transformation. One promising trend is the expansion of vocational and technical training. For decades, export manufacturing relied heavily on low-skill assembly, where repetitive tasks formed the bulk of factory labor. That model is no longer sufficient. Modern automotive and electronics plants manage robotic systems, precision tools, and digital monitoring equipment. In response, technical institutes and industry partners are adjusting curricula to prepare technicians, machinists, and maintenance specialists. Plants in Nuevo León and Querétaro are already employing graduates who step directly from classrooms into skilled roles. Industry-university partnerships, once relatively rare, are becoming a standard feature of workforce preparation. STEM education has also been increasing its reach. Rising demand for engineers, programmers, and applied scientists is reshaping universities from Guadalajara to Monterrey. Guadalajara's electronics corridor pushes for more electrical and software engineers, while Monterrey and Mexico City continue to supply mechanical and industrial talent. At the same time, new programs in smaller states are working to decentralize this talent pipeline. Although Mexico still trails countries with long-standing scientific traditions, the number of STEM graduates has grown steadily, helping narrow one of the critical gaps foreign investors had flagged in the past. Global firms are not waiting for the system to catch up, they are directly shaping it. German automakers have launched apprenticeship programs modeled on dual education systems, training students in both classroom and production floor settings. Asian electronics companies have integrated certifications into university programs, ensuring consistency between academic credentials and industry benchmarks. These initiatives lower the risk of skill shortages. Students who complete them often enter guaranteed jobs, and companies gain assurance that their labor needs will be met without long recruitment delays. Despite these advances, shortfalls remain stark. Urban centers capture the bulk of progress, while rural regions face chronic obstacles. Schools outside major cities lack resources, connectivity, and teacher training, meaning many rural students leave without the qualifications industries now require. The result is a divided system. Students in cities increasingly feed into high-tech supply chains, while rural graduates remain trapped in low-wage informal work or are forced to migrate. The divide is visible across almost all sectors of the economy, and narrowing it will be critical if growth is to become truly inclusive. Demographics sharpen the urgency. Mexico's young population gives it a current edge over older economies, but the pace will not last. Fertility has already declined, and projections indicate the demographic window will begin closing around 2030 as aging accelerates. This means today's workforce preparation is time-sensitive. Without productivity gains, the advantage of a large, young labor pool may disappear just as global competition intensifies.